We had a disturbance between two outlaw motorcycle gangs that resulted in shots being fired in that disturbance.
Outlaw motorcycle clubs are built on power, loyalty, and fear. The Hells Angels have spent decades making sure they sit at the top of that world.
Yeah, baby!
Dominating rivals and controlling territory across continents. But they are not untouchable. Scattered across the US and around the globe are clubs with the size, muscle, and history to challenge them and, in some cases, beat them. These are not casual riders. They are organized, connected, and willing to fight until the last man standing. Law enforcement calls them criminal enterprises. Rivals know them as dangerous enemies.
The U.S. Attorney announced a major sweep and takedown of the Mongols. He called them a violent criminal enterprise.
And when they move in on a piece of territory, it often sparks a conflict that leaves a lasting mark on the biker underworld.
As a journalist, if I'm trying to get into these clubs and see how they operate, do you think that's an easy thing to do?
I would say no. I would say good luck.
Mongols Motorcycle Club. If there's one club the Hells Angels truly hate, it's the Mongols Motorcycle Club. Founded in Montebello, California in 1969, the Mongols started with a chip on their shoulder. Most of their founders were Latino Vietnam veterans who had been turned away from the Hells Angels. Back then, race still played a big role in who got patched in. So they built their own club, and from day one, they weren't just riding. They were gunning for the Angels' territory. It didn't take long for the rivalry to turn bloody. The Mongols proved early on that they weren't afraid of direct confrontation. In the 1990s and early 2000s, they pushed aggressively into areas the Angels considered their own.
Well, the Hells Angels came to the Mongols and said, you need to take it off. And obviously that didn't go well with the members of the Mongols Motorcycle Club. And they basically told them, off.
The result? Drive-by shootings, assassinations, and all-out brawls. One of the most infamous moments came in April 2002, the Laughlin River Run in Nevada. Inside Harrah's casino, Mongols and Hells Angels crossed paths, words turned to shoves, and then came the knives and guns. By the time it was over, 3 bikers were dead. 2 Angels, 1 Mongol, and the casino floor looked like a war zone. Law enforcement has been after the Mongols for decades, and for good reason. The club has been tied to large-scale drug trafficking, weapons dealing, extortion, and violent assaults. In 2008, the ATF launched Operation Black Rain, a massive undercover investigation that led to the arrest of more than 60 members and associates. The charges included murder, racketeering, and narcotics trafficking. Federal prosecutors even tried to strip the club of its trademarked logo, the infamous Mongols patch, arguing that taking their identity would weaken them. The legal battle over that patch still isn't over, and the Mongols still wear it proudly. What makes them such a serious threat to the Hells Angels isn't just the violence, it's the attitude. The Mongols don't back down. They'll roll into enemy turf in broad daylight. They'll start a fight knowing the police are watching. They have no problem escalating a situation until someone gets hurt, or worse. Their membership is tightly organized, loyal, and spread across multiple states and countries, making them hard to corner. And here's the part the Angels can't ignore. The Mongols have beaten them before. In the 1980s, after a violent gang war, the Hells Angels were forced to hand over most of Southern California, including key parts of Los Angeles and the Inland Empire, under a truce. The Mongols claimed the territory, kept recruiting, and survived massive federal crackdowns. In the outlaw biker world, that kind of resilience is a weapon all by itself. For the Hells Angels, the Mongols aren't just another rival. They're a grudge that's lasted more than half a century. Every fight between them is personal. Every loss stings. And in a culture built on reputation, the Mongols have proven again and again that they're not just willing to fight the Angels. They're willing to humiliate them.
Right now at noon, FBI agents are searching the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in West Palm Beach.
Outlaws Motorcycle Club. In July 2008, heavily armed ATF and FBI agents surrounded Outlaws clubhouses in the Chicago area using armored vehicles. It was one of the largest law enforcement crackdowns in the region's history. These raids were part of a long campaign by authorities to disrupt one of the most violent and entrenched outlaw motorcycle clubs in the world. The Outlaws Motorcycle Club, officially known as the American Outlaws Association, AOA, was founded in McCook, Illinois in 1935, making it one of the oldest outlaw biker groups. Long before the Hells Angels existed, the Outlaws were already carving out territory and building a reputation for extreme violence. The rivalry with the Hells Angels began when the Angels tried to push into outlaw-controlled cities in the Midwest. Chicago, Milwaukee, and Detroit quickly became flashpoints. Police reports from the 1970s onward show repeated shootings, firebombings, and brutal assaults tied to these turf wars. In Canada, confrontations between the two groups in the 2000s escalated so much that police compared the streets to a low-level war zone. The Outlaws' criminal operations have included large-scale drug trafficking, contract killings, extortion, and weapons smuggling. Their network stretches across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Australia. Law enforcement agencies have had to form dedicated task forces just to track their activities. Federal operations like Operation 1%er in the mid-1980s and Operation Trojan Horse in 2010 targeted outlaw motorcycle clubs, including the Outlaws, with coordinated raids across multiple states. These actions involved undercover agents, dozens of arrests, and the seizure of drugs, firearms, and cash. One of the most intense campaigns against them came with Operation 00 in 2008, specifically in Chicago. SWAT teams and federal agents raided facilities linked to the Outlaws and their associates. During those raids, law enforcement seized firearms, stacks of cash, and even a live grenade. These were not symbolic arrests. Authorities were hitting at the heart of the Outlaws' leadership and infrastructure. What makes the Outlaws a serious threat to the Hells Angels is not just their willingness to use violence, but their deep territorial roots. The Outlaws have controlled much of the Midwest for decades, operating from fortified clubhouses and supported by alliances with other gangs. Their motto, "God forgives, outlaws don't," is more than a slogan. It reflects their reputation for retaliation. When the Hells Angels challenge them, the Outlaws respond aggressively and often escalate the fight. In the outlaw biker world, territory is everything. The Outlaws have held theirs for generations, and law enforcement's repeated crackdowns have not broken them. They remain organized, armed, and ready for conflict. For the Hells Angels, they are not just another club. They are a powerful, unmovable rival that has been at war with them for decades.
Motorcycle gangs at a gas station. This all happened as thousands of people are in Volusia County to celebrate Bike Week.
Warlock's Motorcycle Club. If you talk to anyone in the biker world about dangerous clubs, the Warlock's name will come up fast. What makes it interesting is that there are actually two of them. One was founded in Philadelphia in 1967. The other started in Florida that same year. They share no official connection, but both built reputations soaked in violence. The Florida Warlocks, founded by Navy veteran Tom Grubb Freeland, are the ones that law enforcement has really kept their eyes on. Why? Because for decades they have been knee-deep in meth trafficking, armed to the teeth and completely comfortable using lethal force to solve problems. Their story is littered with incidents that would make even other outlaw bikers flinch. These aren't bar brawls. We're talking contract killings, armed robberies, and bloody internal purges. Loyalty is demanded, and disloyalty is punished in the harshest way possible. In 2014, 4 members were convicted of murdering 2 of their own in a dispute over drug profits. It wasn't messy or drawn out. It was execution style. Cold, calculated, and final. That's the kind of reputation the Warlocks carry. One where crossing them can be a death sentence. The Hells Angels have had their own run-ins with the Warlocks, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. Back then, both groups were trying to control the same lucrative drug routes in parts of the eastern United States. Clashes happened, and they weren't subtle. Intelligence reports from that era talk about shootouts, arson attacks, and ambushes. In Florida, the Warlocks made a point of siding with other clubs that were already enemies of the Angels, giving them more leverage in any confrontation. And it's not like the Warlocks have had a free ride. Law enforcement has been trying to smash them for decades. In the late 1990s, a series of raids against the Florida chapter uncovered meth labs, huge stashes of narcotics, and military-grade weapons. Even with those blows, the club kept going. In 2013, Operation Trojan Horse hit the Pennsylvania Warlocks hard, with 23 members and associates arrested for drug trafficking and weapons charges. Police even found explosives during those raids. Definitely, this isn't your average biker gang bust. So why are the Warlocks such a threat to the Hells Angels? It's not just the guns or the drugs, it's the way they operate. They don't always follow the unwritten rules between big clubs. They're unpredictable, quick to retaliate, and willing to turn small grudges into bloody wars. Their Florida stronghold puts them in a prime position to control drug flow. And their network of allies means they can make trouble far beyond their home turf. For the Angels, a group like this is dangerous because you can't count on them to act rationally. You can't trust them to let things slide. And when law enforcement has been hammering you for decades and you're still standing, that says something. It says you're not just surviving. You're surviving with teeth bared. Satudara Motorcycle Club. If the Mongols and Outlaws are the Hells Angels' worst American enemies, Satudara is their nightmare from overseas. This club wasn't born in the US, but it has made enough noise to get the Angels' attention worldwide. Founded in 1990 in the Netherlands by friends of Moluccan, Indonesian descent, Satudara stood out from the start for one big reason. Most outlaw motorcycle clubs were dominated by white members. Satudara didn't care about that. They were multi-ethnic, welcoming members from every background, which instantly made them a magnet for tough, ambitious bikers who didn't fit into the traditional scene. From the very beginning, Satudara showed they weren't just another riding club. They moved aggressively in Europe, setting up chapters in Germany, Belgium, Spain, and beyond. Their reputation? Violence, intimidation, and zero hesitation in confronting rivals head-on. Street fights, stabbings, and shootings became part of their story. Police in multiple countries have linked them to drug trafficking, extortion, and violent attacks on other clubs, including the Hells Angels. In the Netherlands, turf battles between the two groups have led to public brawls and deadly retaliation. By the 2010, Satudara had grown into an international force with chapters in Australia, New Zealand, the United States, and even parts of Asia. This wasn't just expansion, it was a deliberate push into territories where the Hells Angels already had a presence. And that's where the real trouble started. In Germany, clashes between Satudara and Angels chapters led to raids, arrests, and heightened police presence in biker-heavy cities. In Australia, the rivalry escalated into street violence so intense that entire neighborhoods were put on police lockdown. Governments didn't just notice, they acted. Satudara has been banned outright in several countries, including the Netherlands and Germany, because authorities considered them a serious threat to public order. In the Netherlands, judges agreed the club was a criminal organization disguised as a motorcycle club. The ban was meant to dismantle them, but it also sent a message about how dangerous they had become. Even after the bans, underground chapters have tried to keep the name alive, showing that the network isn't easy to kill. The threat they pose to the Hells Angels is simple and serious. Satudara doesn't follow the old rules. They don't care about respecting territory the way some traditional outlaw clubs do. They will open a chapter wherever they want, even if it's on the Angels' doorstep. Their multi-ethnic membership also means they can recruit from a wider pool, pulling in people the Angels might not even consider. And with their track record of violence, any confrontation is likely to escalate fast. For the Angels, a fight with Satudara isn't just about turf. It's about defending their reputation on a global scale. Losing ground to a club like this sends the wrong message to rivals everywhere. And that's why Satudara, despite being relatively young compared to some clubs, has earned a place among the most feared outlaw motorcycle gangs in the world.
Crushed the outlaw biker group Rock Machine after a series of arrests in Winnipeg. 11 people were arrested.
Rock Machine Motorcycle Club. If you want to talk about biker wars that shocked an entire country, the story of the Rock Machine and the Hells Angels in Canada is about as bloody as it gets. This isn't a small feud or a series of bar fights. This was a full-scale conflict known as the Quebec Biker War, and it left more than 150 people dead between 1994 and 2002. It was a war fought with guns, bombs, and ambushes in broad daylight, and it turned the Rock Machine into one of the most feared clubs in North America. The Rock Machine was founded in Montreal in 1986 by Salvatore Cazzetta and other members who broke away from another local biker club. From the start, they were different. They weren't just riding for the image, they were heavily involved in organized crime, particularly in drug distribution. When the Hells Angels tried to take complete control of the drug trade in Quebec, the Rock Machine refused to fall in line. That refusal turned into open warfare. The violence escalated quickly. Bombings became a common tactic. Drive-by shootings targeted clubhouses and even family members. Innocent bystanders were killed, including an 11-year-old boy, Daniel Desrochers, who died in 1995 when a car bomb intended for rival bikers exploded near his home. That incident alone caused a public outcry so intense that it pushed the Canadian government to give police broader powers to fight organized crime. Throughout the 1990s, the Rock Machine held their ground against the Angels, despite being outnumbered. They formed alliances with other gangs, including the Bandidos Motorcycle Club, to balance the power. Law enforcement in Quebec described the situation as urban warfare, with police units stretched thin, trying to keep the violence from spilling over into everyday life. By 2001, the war reached a turning point. Facing relentless attacks, the Rock Machine officially patched over to become part of the Bandidos, giving them international backing. But the cost of the war was staggering. Hundreds were injured and more than 150 lost their lives. Even after the official end of the Quebec Biker War in 2002, the Rock Machine name didn't disappear. The club re-emerged in later years, rebuilding chapters in Canada, Australia, and Europe. For the Hells Angels, the Rock Machine represents a dangerous kind of enemy. They've proven they can go toe-to-toe with the Angels for years and survive. They are not intimidated by bigger numbers. They've shown they will fight publicly, in front of cameras, with no concern for public opinion. And perhaps most importantly, they have demonstrated that they can come back from near destruction, a quality that makes any rival harder to eliminate. The Quebec Biker War is still remembered as one of the deadliest organized crime conflicts in modern history. And for the Hells Angels, the rock machine remains proof that even the strongest clubs can bleed. Vagos Motorcycle Club. If the Hells Angels dominate headlines in California, the Vagos own the shadows in much of the Southwest. Founded in San Bernardino, California in 1965, the Vagos built themselves into a green and black army that now stretches across the United States, Mexico, and even Canada. They call themselves Green Nation, and in the outlaw biker world, that name carries weight. Law enforcement describes them as one of the largest and most dangerous motorcycle gangs in the West, and for good reason. The Vagos' reputation didn't come from friendly charity rides. It came from high-stakes drug trafficking, weapons dealing, and a willingness to answer violence with even more violence. Their long-running tensions with the Hells Angels have erupted in shootouts, brawls, and public ambushes. One of the most infamous incidents happened in September 2011 at the John Ascuaga's Nugget Casino in Sparks, Nevada. A gunfight between Vagos and Hells Angels broke out in the middle of the casino floor during a biker rally. Dozens of rounds were fired, and Hells Angels San Jose chapter president Jeffrey Jethro Pettigrew was killed. The shooting set off days of revenge attacks, including drive-by shootings in California. The rivalry with the Hells Angels is fueled by competition for territory and control of drug distribution routes in California, Nevada, and Arizona. The Vagos have been accused of trying to muscle into markets traditionally dominated by the Angels, leading to constant friction. In Mexico, their ties to cartels add another dangerous layer, giving them access to smuggling networks that the Angels would rather control themselves. Law enforcement has been after the Vagos for decades. In 2011, Operation Green Heat targeted their leadership in California, resulting in the arrest of dozens of members on charges ranging from murder to meth trafficking. In 2013, another massive sweep in Nevada and Arizona, known as Operation Pure Luck, took down high-ranking members accused of racketeering, kidnapping, and extortion. Federal prosecutors have repeatedly labeled the Vagos as a criminal enterprise under RICO statutes, the same laws used to dismantle mob families. What makes the Vagos such a serious threat to the Hells Angels is their combination of size, organization, and brutality. They're not a small regional club. They're an international network with deep connections to organized crime. Their members are fiercely loyal, and their leadership structure allows them to coordinate across multiple states and countries. On the street, they're known for rolling deep and showing force in numbers, which makes them intimidating to rivals and hard for police to handle without major operations. For the Hells Angels, the Vagos aren't just another competitor. They're a well-armed, well-connected army that has shown it will fight on sight. And when your rival has both the manpower to stand against you and the alliances to back them up, you can't ignore them. You have to watch them. And in the outlaw biker world, watching usually means preparing for the next fight. Rebels Motorcycle Club. When the Hells Angels pushed hard into Australia in the late 1990s and 2000s, they ran into a problem they couldn't bulldoze. The Rebels Motorcycle Club. Founded in Brisbane in 1969, the Rebels have grown into the largest outlaw motorcycle club in Australia, with hundreds of members and dozens of chapters spread across the country. While other clubs rise and fall, the Rebels have stayed strong by playing a long game, mixing raw intimidation with calculated influence. Violence is part of their story, yes, but it's not the whole picture. The Rebels have built a system. They've infiltrated legitimate businesses, tattoo parlors, trucking companies, security firms, both as a front for illegal activities and as a way to launder money. Police intelligence reports have tied them to drug trafficking, weapons smuggling, and large-scale meth production. But they've also noted how the rebels use business ownership and political connections to protect themselves. In some regions, they've sponsored community events, giving them a public image that can confuse outsiders about who they really are. Their rivalry with the Hells Angels in Australia has been intense. The Angels arrived with their North American reputation and tried to take over prime drug territories and key ports. The rebels didn't just defend their turf, they expanded. There have been brawls, shootings, and firebombing linked to this conflict, but the real fight is over control of the money pipeline. Whoever controls the ports controls the flow of drugs and guns into the country, and the rebels have the home field advantage. Law enforcement in Australia has responded with harsh anti-beaky laws, including anti-association legislation that makes it illegal for members of outlaw motorcycle clubs to gather in public. Police have conducted massive raids on rebels' properties, seizing drugs, cash, and weapons. In 2017, one of the largest coordinated raids in Queensland's history targeted the rebels, with dozens of properties searched and multiple arrests made. Still, the club has survived every crackdown. What makes the rebels so dangerous to the Hells Angels is that they combine the muscle of a street gang with the structure of a business empire. They can fight a public battle on the streets and a quiet one in boardrooms. They can appear as community sponsors while running one of the largest organized crime networks in the Southern Hemisphere. And because they've been part of Australian culture for over 5 decades, they have deep local roots that outsiders can't easily shake. For the Hells Angels, this is the worst kind of rival, one that can't just be fought into submission. To beat the rebels, you'd have to outlast them in the streets, in business, and in influence. And that's a fight the rebels have been winning in Australia for over 50 years.
Today, as they try to raise awareness for bullying and adolescent suicide, Stand for the Silent is a nonprofit that's dedicated to providing free mental health resources to our youth.
Pobob's Motorcycle Club. If you want to understand where outlaw biker culture really started, you can't skip the Pobobs. Their name comes from the original pissed-off bastards of Bloomington, Pobob, formed in California in 1940. They weren't the biggest, but they made history. In 1947, they became a central player in the infamous Hollister Riot, a motorcycle rally in Hollister, California, that went completely off the rails. Bikers, including Pobob members, tore through town, raced in the streets, drank until they couldn't stand, and turned a quiet event into something that looked like a takeover.
It's going to be smoke, like I said before. If you can keep up, you'll probably stay up.
The national press went wild with the story.
Today, as they try to raise awareness for bullying and adolescent suicide, Stand for the Silent.
And just like that, the outlaw biker image was burned into America's mind. That riot didn't just make headlines, it planted the seeds for one of the most notorious biker clubs in history. A year later, Pobob member Otto Friedli broke away and helped found the Hells Angels. That link means the Pobobs aren't just another club, they're part of the Angels' origin story. But over the decades, while the Hells Angels built a global empire, the Pobobs stayed smaller, rooted in California, running their operations with less noise but no less purpose. Today's Pobobs may not have the numbers of the Mongols or the Outlaws, but they have something just as valuable: home turf. In parts of Northern California, they've been a constant presence for decades. Law enforcement has connected them to drug trafficking, stolen motorcycle rings, and weapons sales. But here's the thing, you rarely see them in massive police stings or national headlines. That's intentional. The Pobobs know how to work in the shadows. They keep their circle tight, their profile low, and their business moving. And make no mistake, they still have a history with the Hells Angels. While their early connection comes from Friedli, the decades since have brought competition over territory and influence. There have been violent encounters, but the Pobobs don't go to war for the sake of it. They're patient. They know the value of waiting for the right moment to push back or hold the line. They've also learned the power of blending in. Some members run motorcycle repair shops, bars, and garages. These are places that bring in steady income, give them legitimate fronts, and still keep them anchored in the community. That dual role makes them harder to target as a purely criminal gang. For the Hells Angels, the Pobobs are the kind of rival that can be frustrating. They're not loud, they're not flashy, and they're not trying to take over the world, but they're dug in deep. They know their streets, and they have a personal link to the very beginning of the Angels themselves. And in the outlaw biker world, a rival with history, patience, and a quiet bite can be just as dangerous as the biggest club on the planet. What do you think about these biker gangs? Feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Want more videos like this? Then subscribe to the channel for more eye-opening stories. Thank you so much for staying with us till the end. See you in the next video.